You are listening to the Yeshua community. This is a short reflection on the relationship between the Noahide laws and the ethics of Yeshua, and how these two perspectives can be understood together. The Noahide laws represent a Jewish understanding of what is required of all human beings, regardless of ethnic or religious identity. They function as a moral foundation that applies to humanity as a whole, as described in the Torah's covenant with Noah. The 7 laws of Noah include prohibitions against worshipping idols, cursing God, murder, adultery and sexual immorality, theft, eating flesh torn from a living animal, as well as the obligation to establish courts of justice. They are simple but broad. They do not require non-Jews to follow Jewish ritual practice, only to live decently and fairly. In this way, they express a universal morality while respecting the halakhic distinction between Jews and non-Jews. Even though the Noahide laws form a minimum requirement for non-Jews, that does not mean that spiritual or ethical growth ends there. In Jewish tradition, wisdom is universal, and non-Jews are free to learn from the full richness of Jewish culture, Tanakh, rabbinic ethics, poetry, philosophy, art, and ways of thinking, as long as they do not claim Jewish identity or halakhic obligations meant only for Jews. In this sense, Yeshua, also known as Jesus, can be seen as a bridgebuilder, a Jewish teacher who deepens the Noahide principles through intention, mercy, and character formation, opening a path for non-Jews to draw deeper inspiration from Jewish ethics without becoming Jews. At the same time, it is important to understand why some Jews meet this interest with caution. The difficulty is often not theological but historical. For many, the name Jesus carries not only the memory of a Galilean teacher, but centuries of Christian misuse of power, forced conversions, humiliation, inquisitions, expulsions, and violence carried out in his name. The historical Yeshua, a Jewish moral teacher, was overshadowed by later Christian reinterpretations, and the familiar Jewish face was lost behind a cultural construction. So when a non-Jew today says, "I want to learn about Yeshua in a Jewish context," it can naturally raise concern. Jewish listeners must ask whether this is hidden missionizing or an attempt to reinterpret Judaism from the outside. This caution is not hostility, it is the self-protection of a people shaped by long historical experience. Yet honest dialogue is still possible, but only when this history is acknowledged openly. When non-Jews make it clear that they do not wish to redefine Judaism, when they respect Jewish self-understanding and approach Yeshua without claims of theological superiority, then Yeshua can once again function as a bridge, not a bridge to conversion, but a bridge to understanding. For Yeshua himself taught ethics, intention, and compassion, values deeply rooted in Jewish tradition. When this is recognized, a safer space opens where old patterns do not need to repeat themselves. When we look at Yeshua's ethics more broadly, we see both continuity and intensification of the Noahide framework. Yeshua stood firmly within the Jewish prophetic tradition, and his teachings did not break with the Torah, but deepened its intention. When he speaks of love for God and neighbor, when he lifts up mercy, forgiveness, justice, and truthfulness as the heart of God's will, he moves beyond the minimum. Where the Noahide laws outline the boundary of basic morality, Yeshua points toward an ideal of inner transformation and active love. He assumes the universal ethical foundation and presents the next step, a life that not only avoids evil, but actively seeks good. The Noahide laws prevent injustice. Yeshua's teaching aims to create justice. This becomes especially clear in his call to love one's enemies and forgive generously, far beyond legal obligation. Another important aspect is that Yeshua does not require non-Jews to live as Jews. He teaches moral responsibility and compassion, but does not impose halakhic obligations on those outside Israel's covenant. In this sense, Yeshua's ethics are fully compatible with the Jewish understanding of the Noahide path. Jews follow the Torah's commandments, and non-Jews follow a universal, foundational morality. Yeshua highlights the core intention of the Torah in a way that inspires deeper reflection without erasing the distinction. Thus, the Noahide laws can be seen as the frame, and Yeshua's ethics as the depth. They do not contradict each other, but illuminate human life from two angles: the universal obligation to basic decency and the prophetic call to inner repentance and active love. When the wounds of history are acknowledged, and when respect guides the conversation, these two perspectives can meet, not in the shadow of the past, but in the light of understanding and truth. If this reflection was meaningful to you, like, share, comment, and subscribe. May peace and blessings follow you.